In this video, we're going to take a look at a sample flow to pull NetSuite items and create metafields for specific variants in Shopify. In this example, we're looking at a non-matrix item and updating the metafield of a variant. In Shopify, a non-matrix item, let's look at a sample here. So I have a sample here. You'll see here, this is a product with this specific ID. And it's just a standard item, meaning it's there's no variance like you would have in a matrix item where, for instance, you would have variations of colors and sizes. In this case, it's just a single item with no variance. But in Shopify, even a non-matrix, a single item, still technically has a variant. So if you look at the JSON here, even though this is a single item, it still has a variant ID, but just a single variant. So if you look at the variants here, it's just one. So what we're going to do is basically create a sample metafield for the variant only. And if you look at this, I've already done this actually. So you can see products, and then you have the variant ID here. And this was the sample metafield created for this product variant. So let's take a look at how the flow was configured. So from NetSuite, we're pulling a saved search. So you can see here my saved search, export type all. You can look at that in NetSuite. Okay, so this is my saved search. What I'm returning are just the standard fields. I actually just pulled this from the pre-built integration. But what I really need here is just the variant ID and the product ID, because I need that as a reference to make the call to Shopify to locate the specific variant and product ID. And I also included my metafield here. So I'm utilizing two fields. Doesn't really matter what the source is. It could be a custom field, a standard field, or maybe a pricing field or whatever. In this case, I just pulled from a pricing field for the value of the metafield. So the value is this part right here. And then this second field, I just hard-coded some text for testing, and I labeled it description. So this one is labeled value and this one is description. In this part here, the syntax is not really specific. This could actually be anything. Like this can just say value or description. You don't necessarily have to follow this format. So I'm utilizing value and description fields for this value and description. So when you preview this search, this is what it's going to look like. Alright, so here you'll see the relevant fields are variant ID and product ID. So you don't actually need any of this stuff. You can remove all of that. You just need the variant ID, product ID, and my value and description field. So that's what I'm pulling from the search. So if I go back to the integrator and preview this search, it's going to return all this information. So we can see here variant ID and product ID, and then I have my value and description fields. Now the next step is a lookup. So what I'm doing with this lookup is I'm just looking for any existing metafields for this variant, because I want to be able to do an add or update. If it's an add, then we're just sending the information, the value, the namespace, the key, the description. But if it's an update, you need to reference a specific ID to update. So in this case, when I initially ran this, I just sent it the name, a namespace, key, value, and description, and the type, not value type actually. So I sent it the type, but I didn't specify an ID. Since it was a create operation, it just created this metafield in here. But when I ran it a second time, since it's already existing, then I provided the ID. And I can show you how this looks like in the REST call. I took some screenshots here. So in my initial request, you can see here I called the API for the variant and the specific variant ID. And then I sent it the metafields with the namespace, the key, the value, the type of single line text field, and description. But when I made an update call, I included the ID because I was updating the existing ID. Because otherwise, if it's already existing and you're adding a new one, you're basically adding a new metafield instead of updating the existing one with the same namespace and key. So that's what the lookup step is for. So we're doing a lookup, and let's take a look at the configuration. So we're connecting to Shopify, and our API is product variant, and it says retrieve a list of metafields that belong to a variant. And you can see here the product ID and variant ID. These are just placeholders, so it retrieves the product ID and the variant ID that was pulled from the previous search or the previous step, which is getting data from the search. So we're pulling those IDs in order to look up for the existing metafields. So in this case, if you preview this, it will give you the existing metafield. If it's not existing, then this is not going to pull anything. So it's just going to be blank. So let's do this. And then I have a response mapping. So whatever data it pulled from here, meaning the metafields, is going to put it into an array or a new section in the JSON and labels it metafields. And now the final step is the import. So updating the variant with the metafields. So you're going to see here API name is still product variant, and modify an existing variant. And then this is just to check if any existing records. So which field refers to the variant ID from the saved search. If your item from the saved search doesn't have a variant ID, then it's going to be ignored. But if there's a variant ID, then it's going to push through with it. And then the last thing here is the mappings. So what you're going to see here is I'm passing the namespace and the key. Actually, in this case, I actually just hard-coded the namespace and the key, but you can pull this from any field on the search. And then the value, this one I pulled it from the search, the value and the description. And then the type, I just hard-coded to a single line text field. And you can change this. If you look at the Shopify API, you can just go to their API documentation, shopify.dev/API. So what you're going to need here are these attributes. And then for the type, you can see here the value type is actually deprecated. So what you need to do is provide a type. And there's a list of types if you click there. And you can see here the different types that you can use. In my case, I just use a single line text field, but you can pretty much use anything here. If it's a price, maybe you can use a number decimal, so you have some decimal places. Alright, so and the last thing here is the ID. So this is where you do like an add or update of the Metafield. So during the lookup step, if there's an existing ID, then it's going to pull it, and you're going to have a value for this. This is the source, and then the destination, you're going to pass that over and send an ID in order to do an update call. But if this step pulls nothing, then this will be blank, and essentially this line is going to be ignored since there's no value. So you're essentially creating a brand new namespace and key since you didn't specify an ID. So that's the key thing there to be able to perform an add or update. So yeah, I think that's it. That pretty much covers all of the configuration of this flow. Again, this is for explicitly creating or updating a metafield for a variant. This is just I guess kind of like a proof of concept, and maybe it's also worth saying that the reason we're actually looking into how this can be done is because the Celigo Shopify pre-built integration app doesn't support the creation of variant metafields when it's a non-matrix item. Since you're working with a non-matrix item, meaning a single product, you should be using the metafield of the parent or the product itself, not the variant. Since there's only a single variant, there's really no point in using the variant. So you should be putting it in the parent level. But this flow is really just designed just in case for whatever reason you want to add that metafield at the variant level, even if it's just a single item. Alright, that's it. Thanks for watching.